Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Prescribing Lifestyle Podcast. Today, my guest is Toni Morrow. She's the creator of the website Navigating Lipedema. Toni has her own journey, and I'll get her to share her journey. This condition is often misunderstood and very hard to diagnose. And her mission is to raise awareness, share reliable information, and help others navigate this condition, lipedema. So, welcome to the podcast, Toni.
Thank you, Dr. Charlton. It's really nice to be here, and it's so great to be chatting about lipedema tonight because, like you said, it's often really difficult to diagnose, and I think there's probably a lot of women out there who may have the condition. They have
Mm,
that feeling that something's not quite right with their legs, which is how I discovered or was diagnosed.
mm.
So yeah, it's great to be raising awareness and talking about the condition. So thanks
Yeah,
for
yeah.
having me.
Amazing. So it's pretty common, isn't it? I just did a quick search. 11% of women worldwide may have lipedema, which is really common.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a small percentage. And my understanding is as well, just from kind of digging into the research a little bit, is that number might actually even be lower than the true number because
Mm,
there's a lot of women who are undiagnosed out there.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it may
So
even be a little bit higher.
yeah. So what's your story? How did you find out you had lipedema?
Yeah, well, I had what would probably be considered a fairly standard journey to diagnosis, which isn't great. It's not the best
Mm,
journey. It took about 12 years
wow.
for me to be diagnosed. Yeah, and I actually just found a paper recently that showed that I think it was around 14 years
Oh my
is
God.
the standard time to diagnosis for early stage lipedema, which is
Mm,
crazy, right?
mm,
But my diagnosis actually came in that last year. Like over those 12 years, I was kind of back and forth to the doctor because I'd had pain in my legs,
mm,
unexplained swelling. They were probably the
mm,
two most common symptoms.
mm,
Um, and then I started to gain a little bit of what I thought was really strange fat in odd
mm,
parts of my legs. It was just in a really odd pattern or
mm,
distribution and
mm,
had a really kind of odd ripply texture over time. Anyway, I saw doctors on and off over those 12 years, and the most common kind of response was, oh, maybe just try a little bit more exercise, maybe try
mm,
changing your diet.
mm,
And so I'd go away and, maybe increase my time at the gym or change my diet a little bit, and then nothing would happen. So I'd forget about it.
mm.
When you've got a busy life, you've got a lot going on, these things kind of fall to the wayside after a while
Yeah.
until the next flare up of symptoms. Anyway, I had some time off work about 2 years ago, and I actually had an accident that caused I had to have some surgeries on my eye. And
Mm,
while recovering from that,
mm,
um, Avi, I had all this time on my hands and thought, I'm going
mm,
to solve this problem with my legs
mm,
while I've got all this time on my hands. And I happened to see an Instagram post where a lady had posted her legs and was talking about lipedema, and I recognized the shape. Because
mm.
with lipedema, the distribution of the extra fat it's a really distinctive look. Your
Yeah.
legs get a little bit of a column shape. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, that's my legs.
Mm,
And so I started researching, found a lot of information around anti-inflammatory diet potentially
mm,
being helpful,
yeah.
compression. So I
Mm,
started all those therapies before I had even found or gotten a
mm,
formal diagnosis. And
mm.
while I was doing that, I looked for a physician who was going to be able to give me a formal diagnosis.
Okay.
Um, and so, yeah, I think that last period of getting the actual diagnosis, getting from that Instagram post to my final
Ah,
diagnosis was probably somewhere between 6 and 12 months.
wow.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
just for the listeners who's not familiar with the condition, what exactly is lipedema? How would you describe this condition?
Yeah, it's a loose connective tissue disorder is how it's
Mm,
classed.
mm-hmm,
Um, and the primary symptom or sign of lipedema is what's described as an abnormal distribution of fat and
mm,
growth of fat in the legs. So often there's a really quite distinctive shape in women who have lipedema, and it is a condition that mainly affects women. So they'll often have a really tiny torso, and then um, a disproportionately sized lower limbs.
mm,
And sometimes in the arms as well. I've got a little bit in my upper arms, and the fat kind of gathers in a disproportionate pattern.
mm-hmm,
Sometimes swelling, really common for that extra adipose tissue to be painful or tender to touch. Some
mm,
women even report, the pain um, being, if a cat was to step onto their lap, the
mm-hmm.
pain is quite extreme, even with such a light
Wow.
touch. I've been quite lucky. Mine wasn't that bad, but it was still odd. It was one of the symptoms that flagged for me that something was wrong with my
Mm,
legs. And the other really common sign is excessive bruising with very little
mm.
trauma.
Yeah, yeah,
And that was a really common symptom that I had in my legs as well. Not everyone gets all symptoms.
yeah.
So some women might have the um, the extra fat distribution, a little bit of swelling, but they may not have the pain, for example. So it's not the same in every patient. Mm.
Very interesting.
Yes, and
Yeah.
no cure as yet. So it was um, first recorded around 90 years ago, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, not a huge amount of research until probably the last 5 years, I think is
Mm,
understanding. So a large bulk of the research out there has been done in that kind of last 5 years.
I went to medical school about 20 years ago and I was never taught this condition in medical school.
I've heard it's not in the medical curriculum at all. And I think the way that how that's manifested now is that a lot of GPs aren't aware of it, number one, or if they
No.
are aware of it, not sure how to diagnose. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've only learned this condition through my own research and through the low carb community and just listening to podcasts and people
Yeah,
experience just like
amazing.
this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
From
feel like
your,
at the
yeah,
moment, social media is probably
yeah,
one of the um, probably the easiest places to find
yeah, yeah,
information on anemia, which I think is a bit of a double-edged sword. I think in some
yeah,
ways it's really great, obviously,
yeah,
how I worked out what was
yeah,
going on with my legs. But I think there's a danger of misinformation on social
yes,
media as well. So, yeah.
absolutely, yes. From what you researched, any idea why this happens? Is it genetics or is it some people are predisposed to it? Are you born with it? But it often comes up when there's a hormonal change, like people put on more weight and put on this lipedema when you go through some hormonal change, like they have a baby or two, and then this lipedema keeps getting worse. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So my understanding so far is that it's a genetic condition, number one. So it's
Mm,
very commonly hereditary as well.
mm,
But genetic, and I know uh, there's a doctor, an Australian doctor, which is amazing, in Melbourne, who's been involved in some research. Name will come to me shortly.
mm.
And the research, I believe, has found that it's a stem cell, adipose stem cell dysfunction,
Mm,
causing the excessive growth of the adipose tissue or those adipose cells that
mm.
are lipidemic. Which is great. I think it's great that that's been uncovered because
Yeah.
no doubt understanding the source of the problem, I guess, or hopefully leads to them being able to find um, a cure, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I think that was Dr. Rahman in Melbourne.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I will check on that.
That's okay.
Um, but yeah, so definitely genetic in terms of the
Mm,
source. But you're absolutely right. The progression of the disease, so far, my understanding is that it is um, hormonally triggered. I think
hmm.
triggered might be the right word. So yeah, those
Yeah.
periods of um, kind of significant changes in hormone seem to be
Mm,
what triggers the progression of the disease.
yeah. Times
And
like puberty and pregnancy and menopause.
exactly,
I think that's how I
exactly,
understand it.
exactly. I've gotten, I think, quite lucky because I decided not to have children, and I think that's actually
Mm,
why my lipedema has potentially stayed at stage one.
might be good for
Yeah.
you.
Good
They're
for me,
they're
but
painful
I
sometimes.
do heading towards perimenopause and menopause. I do kind of wonder, and I've definitely, I'm keeping a close eye on it.
Mm,
I'm wondering if that's going to be a trigger for progression for me.
yeah,
I did have that conversation with my endocrinologist, which was who she was eventually who gave me the formal diagnosis.
yeah.
And she did indicate that if you're already kind of taking those conservative measures and
Hmm.
that's having a positive impact on the lipedema,
Yeah.
then there's no reason for it to progress when you do hit those periods of
Oh,
hormone
okay.
change, which is interesting, right? And a bit of a relief, but I'm kind of in two minds with that as well. I'm still quite
Yeah.
vigilant. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Let's go through the conservative measures. What do you
Yeah.
do for yourself? What's your conservative measures?
Yeah. Oh, look, I've been so lucky because I had that time off work. I had all this time on my hands to be able to research
Mm,
and then effectively trial lots of different lifestyle changes, I guess, changes to my diet. And in the end, like diet was number one. That was the first thing
hmm.
that I changed. And
Yeah.
my understanding, just from all the reading I've done, my understanding is that diet is probably the most important as well because there's that inflammation that's
Mm,
driving the condition,
yeah.
that kind of underlying inflammation. Um, Finding the right diet to reduce that inflammation seems to be the biggest factor.
Mm.
It
So it's an
was for me.
anti-inflammatory diet.
And
And
exactly,
yeah, so
yeah.
what do you do for your anti-inflammatory diet?
I eat high protein, low carb
Mm-hmm.
predominantly.
Mm-hmm.
I discovered early on as well that histamine rich foods were
Mm-hmm.
causing quite a bit of inflammation for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that was tough as well
Mm,
because histamine is present in quite a lot of what I would have thought very healthy foods, things like spinach, tomatoes, avocados,
okay.
fruits. So, yeah. And I had started not just kind of experiencing pain and swelling in my legs, but I was starting to get skin rashes,
Mm,
my scalp, on my face, on the rest of my body as well. Um, and so I cut out a lot of histamine rich foods. There wasn't a lot left, Dr.
mm-hmm.
Charlton, not
Yeah.
much left at all. It was a very strict diet. So I spent for probably about 3 months. I ate largely the same 3 meals a day and two snacks. Same thing
Okay.
every day for 3 months until everything settled right down. And
Yeah.
then I started reintroducing things like tomatoes and spinach occasionally,
Mm,
and just watching whether they caused a reaction.
mm-hmm.
But otherwise, it was meat, so whole foods basically,
Yeah.
meat, little bit of dairy, some veggies like your zucchinis, cabbage, carrots, things that weren't kind of loaded with histamines and were
Mm-hmm.
fairly easy on the body, I think, or I
Mm,
felt like that. And fish as well, a lot of fish. My rule was basically nothing out of a packet if I could help it. Um, and no pasta, no really low carbs. I tried to stay under about 50 grams of carbs per day.
great.
Very,
Amazing.
very, very restrictive for that 3 months. But what
But
I've
it,
found
yeah.
ever since is that I can eat a little bit of that
Okay.
food here
So
and
you
there.
introduce the food
Yeah,
back a bit. Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, not regularly. I certainly
Okay.
wouldn't do it daily, but I do find that when I do have it now, if it's a special occasion, I won't get that kind of pain in my legs, the really obvious
Yeah,
swelling, any skin rashes, nothing like that. But I
sure.
certainly
Okay.
wouldn't push that.
Yeah.
It's special occasions only,
Yeah. Well,
generally.
that's great how you discovered what works for you. What other
Hmm.
what other
Yeah.
things do you do in terms of lifestyle that works for your lipedema?
Compression I found
Mm.
was really important. It's not my favorite thing
Mm.
at all, but I found it's really, really effective. I probably only wear it 3 to 4 times a week. I'm lucky I find that that's enough.
Mm.
Um, but I also found that I had a series of shockwave treatments as well.
Mm.
I had 10 shockwave treatments, and I found that I've needed compression a lot less after that.
Mm.
Um, so I don't need to wear it so consistently. Um, yeah, so Shockwave was extremely, extremely effective. That was a really nice surprise, actually. I'd read a pilot study by, I think it was Karen Ashforth or
Okay.
Ashford, her name is, occupational therapist in the US who did a pilot study. I think it was 8 patients,
Mm-hmm.
and 4 of them she did shockwave treatment on a series
Mm-hmm.
of, I think it was 6 treatments of shockwave, and the other 4 patients she did a series of 6 ultrasound cavitation
Mm-hmm.
treatments. Really, both treatments were very, very effective, but just a very small pilot study, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so she's moving on to do a larger study now, I believe. But I thought, well, those results are pretty amazing. 100% of the patients experienced really significant improvements. And so I decided I'm going to trial that on myself.
Mm.
And both treatments are they don't have really any side effects, so to
Mm.
speak. So I thought, okay, I feel like this is quite safe. So I had a
Mm.
series of 10
How
shockwave treatments.
often how often would you need the shockwave?
I was going twice a week in the beginning, and then we dropped that back to once a week and then once a month
All
for
right.
the last 2 treatments it was. And the benefits were almost immediate. Yeah.
Wow.
So within 2 treatments, I had almost no pain left in my legs, which
Wow.
was amazing.
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah.
And it's amazing how, when you've been having pain for a significant part of your life, how used to it
Yeah.
you become. And then when it's
Yeah.
gone, it's quite significant.
Yeah.
It also got rid of the heaviness in my legs. So
Okay.
I can't remember how long I felt like my legs were kind of filled with cement, just
Wow.
constantly heavy. And that disappeared quite quickly. Even the skin texture on my legs improved because they
Okay.
quite often had a bit of a kind of grey look to the skin,
Mm.
and a bit mottled. And after the shockwave, the the colour returned to my skin on my legs. I
Mm.
don't know if that's because of improved blood flow,
Yeah.
potentially. Um,
Mm.
and the other fantastic outcome of the shockwave as well was improved muscle activation.
Mm.
Yeah, and the physiotherapist that was doing the treatment for me said it was likely because of the breaking down of all the kind of fibrotic tissue. I had quite a bit, particularly in my thighs. It felt like really hard scarring on the inside.
Yeah.
And all that started to break down and soften.
Mm-hmm.
And so she said, you're going to be having improved blood flow through to the muscles now because we've gotten rid of some of that
Mm.
fibrotic tissue. So
Mm-hmm.
then I found my weights workouts were improved because my muscles were
Great.
firing a lot
Yeah.
better. Yeah. So there was kind of this really beautiful cycle of improvements over time with
Yeah.
Shockwave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
would you go to a physio to get shockwave?
Yeah, yeah, physiotherapist. I think in Australia, I actually had my treatment in Thailand because I was over there for 5 months,
Okay.
and I was lucky enough to find a physio who was happy to do the treatment over there. In Australia, there are physios who use the shockwave, but I couldn't find any that were using it on for lipedema specifically.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, and also podiatrists seem
Mm,
to
yeah.
for
Okay.
plantar fasciitis.
Yes, I actually
Um,
had that. I had plantar
did you?
fasciitis, and I had
Yeah,
4 shockwaves for my plantar fasciitis, and that
yeah.
cured it
There you go.
until it came back
It
again a
came
few
back.
months after.
Yeah, right, right. It seems to be having really good results for condition where there's chronic pain.
Mm,
I think one clinic that I reached out to in Sydney who said that they would be open to treating lipedema
mm,
if I wanted to come in. They've been using it for treating pelvic pain,
okay.
which I thought was interesting. Yeah. So I had reached out to them and I kind of did the spiel, which I usually do when I'm reaching out to anyone for treatment or advice with lipedema. I pop a few links in the email. This is lipedema. If you haven't heard about it, click through. Here's a couple of studies. And then I'm looking for someone who can do the shockwave treatment on me. Here's the pilot study if you want to have a bit
Hmm.
of a read.
Hmm.
And that's got kind of all the machine settings and parameters that are required as well.
Okay.
And yeah, this one clinic in Sydney had mentioned that they would be happy to give it a go. So, if anyone who's listening is wanting to maybe try the shockwave, that would be my recommendation. Just kind of get onto Google and do
Hmm.
a bit of a search in your area for a physiotherapist who has the shockwave equipment.
Hmm.
They usually seem to promote it on their website.
Yeah.
And then when you find someone, just pop in an email, hey, I've got this condition, it's lipedema. Here's a link if you want to read
Hmm.
about it.
Mm,
I'm looking for a physio who's happy to give me some shockwave treatment. Here's a link
mm.
to the pilot study.
Great. All right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic tips for those with lipedema. Any other treatments that you would suggest the listeners to look into? Like even
I think
surgery? Would you
diet.
look into surgery?
Yeah, I have done a little bit of research into surgery, and I will keep doing so. It seems like the water-assisted liposuction is the gold standard.
All right. Mm-hmm.
Lymphatic sparing water-assisted lipo. The only thing that's held me back so far is that some patients have reported that they've had lipedema growth in other areas of the body after having, let's say, the legs
Mm-hmm.
operated on. They've noticed that the lipedema has kind of proliferated in other areas, which
Mm.
kind of made me stop. And yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
well,
still
that's
kind
not
of
good.
thinking about, how do I feel about that? Is that
Yeah.
something, a risk that I want to take? Um, yeah. So
Mm.
I'm undecided on that one so far, and I think it really is early days for
Yeah.
surgery as well. But I know, for some women, it's just really, really effective, particularly when it comes to pain. So
Okay. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And I know
Mm.
there's I think it's around 4 or 5 surgeons in Australia who are very well known for their treatment of lipedema with surgery.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got some really great surgeons here. Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
And you have a website called Navigating Lipedema. Tell us about the website.
I do. I built Navigate Lipedema after, I guess, locking in my own treatment program after I'd done all the research, trialed all the different kind of lifestyle methods and conservative methods, and reached a point where I thought, yeah, this is the treatment plan for me.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I've done all this research and gathered all this information, probably hundreds of hours.
Mm.
This has got to be useful for someone else. If I can save some other women having to do all of this research themselves,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be great? So I put up a research library. I just kind of gathered all of the papers that I found useful, the
Mm-hmm.
presentations, the videos,
Yeah.
and then it just kind of grew from there. And so now I've outlined, I guess, a bit of a way to build an effective treatment program for patients
Okay.
out there who are maybe, working busy jobs, have kids, have families they're looking after. It's really challenging to put
Probably
all
got
of
no
those.
clue where to start.
Well, exactly. And then once you do find all those little changes that you need to make in a day, um, building those new habits it's
Yes.
quite challenging. It's quite
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah.
So I've tried to put a little bit of my thinking around
Yeah.
that into the website, just as a bit of guidance for anyone who's maybe looking for some help with that,
Mm-hmm.
along with the research library, and for anyone who's looking for someone to give them some face-to-face help as well.
Mm-hmm.
I offer one-on-one workshops, so I've popped that up on a separate page as well. If anyone
Amazing.
wants some help with building out those daily habits and building that plan, or even navigating the health system to find someone who can diagnose them.
Yeah, yeah. I think that'll
Yeah.
be really good help for those who are lost in the system and just don't know where to start.
Mm. Which I think is common. I think it's very common because if we think about the fact that a lot of GPs don't even know about the condition and may not
Yeah.
even recognize it, right? I think it was for me 4 clinicians in the end. Firstly, I found a physiotherapist on a lymphedema clinician list.
Okay.
So I reached out to that clinic and said, "Hey, I know you're a lymphedema specialist, but I think I have lipedema,
Yeah.
something you might be able to help me with." And so I saw her first, and from there, back to my GP, and then a lipedema specialist, and then an endocrinologist in the end. So
So it
four
took you,
clinicians, four
yeah, it took you a
clinicians,
few specialists to
yeah,
see.
and quite a bit of research. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's a challenge to navigate.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more. The more I'm understanding this condition, I'm seeing a few more and I'm gathering a little bit more confidence in diagnosing. But
Yes.
I've got a couple of physios that I like to refer these people to reinforce this diagnosis. That's how I'm working at the moment.
Amazing. Yeah, yeah. What are the challenges that you kind of come across the most commonly when you have a potential lipedema patient?
I think it's just the unfamiliarity of this condition. And having been a GP for 20 years, I've only known this condition for about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so that's the main thing. But there was one time I told the lady that she might have lipedema and she's eating a standard diet and I told her you might really have to go low carb or keto and
Yeah.
she stopped coming back to me. I think
Oh
she's
no.
not quite ready to change her diet and lifestyle as yet.
Yeah, it's a big change and
Mm,
it's really challenging. I mean, I'm really thankful that I had, that little bit of time off work. And I'm single, I don't have children, and I feel very, very lucky that at this stage of life, I had that time and space to do that research and then build those new habits through my
yeah.
day and be really strict with my diet because I know otherwise it would be really challenging. Yeah.
Yep. And amazing work that I hear you're doing, gathering a lot of practitioners that you're trying to build a directory on your website.
Yes, I'm excited about this actually because I mean I think just the fact that um or my experience going to 4 clinicians in the end, even after I'd kind of realized it was an Instagram post that told me I think this is what I've got, but even from there it was 4 clinicians,
Mm,
and I did a lot of research
hmm
on each one to find each one of those clinicians, because I didn't want to be going from one doctor to the next,
Yeah.
who may not know about lipedema. Um, and I also thought as well, if I see a physician who doesn't know about lipedema, how are they going to know who to refer me on to? I need to do
Mm,
that work. I just need to do that work for myself, and that
yeah.
helps my doctors as well.
Yeah.
And so then I thought, well, what could be useful for all the other ladies out there that maybe don't know where to start? I think it would be a directory of lipedema aware clinicians in Australia.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah,
I,
so it's going well, gathering all those names and details behind the scenes and working on putting that page up on my website. So hopefully that'll be done soon and it'll
great.
just give women a resource to go to, a starting point, I think.
Yeah. And just to give the listeners a bit of perspective, you don't do this full time. You've got another
No.
job, isn't it? What do you do
It
as
could
your main job?
I'm a marketer in my main
Okay.
job. At the moment, I'm working on freelance projects and
All
have
right.
been for a couple of years. But normally, I'm in technology marketing, tech marketing.
All
My
right.
last role was it was actually with a company called Prescription who do real world data, real world evidence. So they actually this is fascinating actually, and it's going to be really useful in the future for lipedema, I think. They take Medicare and PBS data, beautiful longitudinal patient journey data, and analyze that using AI and machine learning to shorten time to diagnosis for rare diseases, for
Oh,
example,
wow.
which
Yep.
is amazing, right? They can
Yep.
find points within those journeys
Yep.
where intervention can happen to shorten the
Okay.
journey. And
Cool.
also look at things like disease progression,
Mhm.
cancer metastases, and ways to improve that, efficacy of drugs in the real world as well. So really fascinating stuff.
Mm.
And all in the back of my mind for lipedema, because ultimately I would love to be able to have an impact on that time to diagnosis. Yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
looking at ways that maybe data can be collected. It's not being collected by Medicare at the moment. Obviously, there's no item number for lipedema, so there's no
No.
data for us to even dig into.
Okay.
So whilst I'm working on the website, my mind's kind of also bubbling away in the background about, okay, how might we be able to collect this data
Yeah.
so that we can kind of make those leaps forward that can happen when you've got a big pool of data and you run AI across it. So
Wow. Amazing. Yeah, that'll
yeah,
be great. Awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your work.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thanks for having me on. It's great to talk about lipedema. And I feel like if our conversation reaches one patient out there who feels like I know something's wrong with my legs,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't put my finger on it,
Yeah.
um, and we can kind of light the path forward, then
Yes.
isn't that wonderful? Yeah,
Yeah, I have a few patients that I see who knows they know they've got lipedema, and
yeah,
sometimes I on the streets I can see it.
yeah.
And
I
I
know what
dare
you
not say anything to those ladies, strangers.
I know exactly what you mean. It becomes um, what's the word? It becomes really obvious that there is 10% of the population,
Yeah.
isn't there?
Yeah, well, maybe those friends, if you've got some friends that you can see it, maybe they can share this podcast episode to their friends who they think might have lipedema.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're based in Melbourne, aren't you?
Yes, I'm in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Great.
patients out there who are looking for a physician who's lipedema aware.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see them and point them in the right direction.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. Where can our listeners find you?
They can find me at navigatelipedema.com. Nice and easy. And I'm at the Gold Coast now, but I kind of
Oh,
go
okay.
between the Gold Coast and Sydney. Yeah.
All right. And
But
have you
when I
got social
do,
media as well?
I do. Yep. I'm on Instagram, Navigate Lipedema on Instagram.
Okay.
And when I run workshops, I usually run them remotely. So location doesn't matter too much.
Sure. All right. I'll put all the links in the show notes.
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Tony, for coming on the Prescribing Lifestyle podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me again.
Great. All
Great.
right. Well, thank you, everybody, for staying tuned. As I always say, if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after anybody else. So stay tuned for another guest next time. I'll bring to you another amazing person. Thank you.